Podcasting Network, home of the Dresden Files podcast, 42 Entertainment, and many others. More podcasts like this one can be found at brokenjars.xyz.
Hello everyone, this is the third episode of High Fantasy, and we're gathered here today at early o'clock to talk about more High Fantasy. So if I sound shitty this time, it's because I'm still tired and it's all Jacob's fault.
Sorry, got things to do. And you wanted to record today, or this weekend, because you have other priorities other than this podcast, so...
Well, so Jacob is here and Colin, and he has a webcam, so people who are listening to a podcast with video can now see his face. And we're also joined by a guest, John, who was on the Dresden Files episode 23, which was the retrospective What If episode. So he is a traveling podcast now. So the segment that we instituted to promote productivity, what have us three, Colin and Jacob, done this past week?
I've done about 10 to 15 pages. I'm about to hit page 80 of my first draft for Corlex, so moving right along there. The last 50 pages have gone a lot faster than the first 30, so that's nice. So yeah, I've actually been really productive in the last 6 days.
Speak for yourself. I think I got like 500 words done. What'd you say, Colin?
I'm not going to ask how he writes that much.
He does it by hand, so his pages are different from our pages.
Probably writing like 5 words a page.
No, I just, that's my lunch hour. I eat lunch and I write every day.
Oh, nice.
So that's what I do at lunch at work. So people look at me funny at work because I'm in the cafeteria in the corner just like writing all the It's also one reason I eat my lunch late, so there's not a lot of people down there.
Judging.
So Colin, what have you done? What did you accomplish?
I got about 650 words on a new story that I decided to start.
Yeah, that's a problem, to keep starting stories instead of ever finishing them.
Starting is so much more fun than finishing.
Yeah, finishing's hard.
The middle is quite difficult.
Yeah, once you get to the endings are fun to write sometimes, but then you've just got to power your way through.
You have to get to the ending part, actually.
Yeah.
But then you got to, once you end, you have to go back and, edit and rewrite some more and re-edit. And so, yeah.
Open the dumpster, go back a week later, dig it back out.
And have excessive amounts of alcohol to get yourself through it. But we're not talking about alcohol consumption right now. We're talking about creative processes.
Coffee consumption right now.
Amen.
Yeah. So last week we were talking about world building and all the things that you need to take care of in your world building and explain. So how do you actually come up with the original spin, the spark of an idea that makes you want to write the story? Anything in your world building, your characters, your plot. How do you guys come up with that?
Oh, is this my turn now?
Yes.
Sure.
Oh, wonderful. So, Alex, as I told you back when I was on the Dresden podcast, my creative process is a little wonky. I've only recently started writing, but I've been playing Dungeons & Dragons and other role-playing games for almost a decade now. So it's really easy for me to just whenever you move to a new city, it's really hard to get that group of friends together to consistently play week after week after week, especially as, people grow up, people become adults, people get busy. So I just play D&D with myself and build the world, throw a bunch of quests in, maybe put some NPCs in for flavor, and then trying to ignore what I've done, I make a character, and, I kind of play through it as I would a Dungeons & Dragons game. Except rather than, talking to myself for 3 hours, I write it down.
Interesting.
It's really not that bad of an idea. Sometime when I was 15, I was just writing really stupid, terrible shit. But I remembered I had a lot of fun once and having this council of power people. There were 9 of them, and I applied each one of them to different alignments in the classic D&D sense, and I just kind of like tried to figure out what the hell they would do with the situation. And I had a lot of fun with it, even though I never ever used it again.
Yeah, I find like the rules in D&D just help facilitate story building because that's what you're doing, right? Like as either running a game or being a player in that game, you're essentially becoming part of a cooperative storytelling process. And the end goal for D&D is to have fun and to create this sense of adventure for everyone involved, including the DM. So like when you're just doing it all by yourself, it's a little bit more work, but you can put it down on paper and share it with everyone else.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good thing.
Yeah. I also have a nice little dial on my desk where I labeled it the intensity-o-meter. So however stressed my character is, I get to turn the dial up, and of course I labeled it 1 to 11.
Of course. Like
Okay.
you do.
Like any sane person would do. So when I'm like coming up with these scenes, I'm just like, all right, put the dial meter where like right in front of my vision, turn it to where I need the dial to be at, and always like have that visual reminder of like how stressed my character and his allies are going to be during this scene.
That's cool. Yeah, might have to do that. Sort of like a totem for you to focus your writing.
And then you just need to make reasons for why they're so stressed. But I do like the tension monitoring that way. That's pretty cool.
Because like if you're like in the middle of a fight, you're going to be turning the stress dial up super high. It's going to be a really tense fight, and you don't want it to be like the level 3 characters versus the level 1 encounter where they just like literally step on some faces and walk through it, right?
Right.
That might be entertaining in a hilarious way for a group of players, but it's not entertaining for somebody who's coming from outside and reading it. And so you have to find that nice balance because like I'm fortunate enough to have players, although we meet like once a month, which is not at all often enough. And so sometimes they get like a really easy challenge, and I want to see how they're going to deal with it, and they just like turn it into a complete hilarious farce, and it's amazing. And other times I challenge them, and it turns out to be like a really great storytelling experience. But it's the lack of stress in those encounters doesn't really add to a good storytelling experience for somebody who's coming from the outside. It works well because everyone in the group has been meshing together and knows how to tell a story together.
Yeah, tension is kind of like my favorite part of reading and writing. So one of the reasons I wrote so little is that the scene I was working on, not to mention the combat aspects I've already complained about, is that I'm actually showing off the characters. I'm showing out how badass they are, and they're not stressed in any way, which just made it boring for me.
She's not torturing them, so she's not having fun.
Right.
Exactly.
Because she hates her characters.
Just a little
You're
bit.
weird. You're weird.
I love to hate them.
Well, I mean, like, at some point you have to realize, like, if you're giving them, like, consistently giving them scenes where they're just like, yeah, I'm so awesome, you're just like, well, am I really just going to circle jerk my character this hard? Like, is it really that necessary for me to just feel like, yeah, my character is this awesome? No, you're gonna tell the reader that through how they overcome the difficult challenges you put in front of them, not
You're
through...
going to show the reader that, because show, not tell.
Excuse me. Excuse me for making one wrong word happen, alright?
It's important. Show, not tell.
Correct.
You can
We're
tell
gonna-
things sometimes.
Sometimes, but not the big things. You don't tell that the character is badass by telling the reader. You show how badass they are, and the reader comes to their own conclusion, which is much more powerful.
Line 1,
Oh.
book 2, middle of a scene. I'm a badass. I'm gonna do it.
Okay. I mean, I think Butcher could come up with, like, pull that off, so maybe you just need to be as good as Jim Butcher. So how do you guys, the other two, how do you guys come up with your ideas, the spark of your story?
Sometimes for me it's really random. I wrote an entire short story based off a line from Friends. We were watching Friends, and they said, we have Reservations at 8. And I'm like, man, that would be a really great title for a book, Reservations at 8. And so I wrote this entire, short story about this guy who's going on a date at 8. And so it's this entire, thing. So a lot of times for me, what I'll do is I'll just get like a nugget of an idea from something I've seen or just like thinking about. And then I'll just write down like the first couple pages, be like, oh, this works. And then kind of go from there. Like, I'm really random with how I do it. I don't, like, sit down like, all right, I'm going to make a story. It's just, like, whatever, like, whenever I get a spark of inspiration, I just go with it instead of just letting it die.
I feel
Colin?
that...
Keep going. If you have an opinion, share your opinions.
I was going to say, like, I feel that, too. Like, there have been so many times where it's just like, oh, this is just a rehashing of XYZ, or this is just that story told in a different light. But that's not really the thing. Like, you get that inspiration from somewhere, and then you put it through, the blender that is your mind in terms of, content in, content out. Like, I've gotten inspiration in my story from so many different places, but because it's all come, into me, been processed there, and then coming out as, like, one cohesive thing, it's not always apparent that, like, I stole that from here, or I stole that from there, or this is totally where I got that idea from. It's like, this is my story, and it incorporates, like, some different things from other places, and definitely don't feel afraid to use something like that as inspiration, even if it's just, like, something as silly as a line from Friends. Right. Not to knock your story, Jake.
No, it was terrible, but I fully admit it was terrible.
Yeah.
But once you have the idea, that little spark, you can start building around it, So, like, I like to get at least a little bit started when I have an idea, even if it's just, like, something on the back of a napkin, a couple sentences of how the story would start. That gives your brain a hook to, like, go back and, like, okay, well, I have this little nugget, and let's expand on it now that it's in place. I think it's really important to put things in place before you, like, to start expanding on the story.
Yeah.
Like, the entire, what I'm writing now was, Ryan was like, hey, we should write a book, and it should be about a space bounty hunter. That was it. And I'm like, okay, let's see how this goes. And then I started writing, like, the next day, and, now I've written, before I restarted, 25,000 words maybe, and now we're going forward, so... into a book, so
please
can start
tell
from
me
anywhere.
his working name was Boba Fett.
No, I was like I call him Corlex, and so we were just like, I was like, oh, that seems like a decent name, so I just went from there, and I was like, well, you know what, alliterative names, seem to work for Stan Lee, so they work for me, so I called him Cody, and so we went from there.
Nice.
I just like piling in ideas from everything I'm doing at once. So, like, one thing will be like, that's a cool start for a story. And then I do something else and I'm like, that's a fun addition to it. And I just throw in something else. So, like, the newest one I started, I was playing Witcher and I'm like, oh, cool, vampires that aren't, like, stupid vampires that are out nowadays. I'm like, I kind of want to do a story like that. And I made in the Black Company. I'm like, I like small bands of people doing cool things. And then I was reading about the Holy Roman Empire, and I'm like, free cities are cool. Literally, my ideas typically just tend to be a blender of what I'm doing and what sounds fun, and playing those off each other and seeing what you can come up with that's different than things you've read.
But you're kind of always focused on things that are around you at the time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I get a lot of influence from whatever game I'm trying to play. So, like, I absolutely love Dragon Age Origins. I was basically doing nothing but playing that for an entire summer, and I got very hooked onto it. And I'm desperate to try to figure out how to write the same story in just a way that isn't copyright infringing.
Change the setting. Do it in space.
No. I really liked the aspects of the Darkspawn and the type of taint that was going around and, like, hurting the Earth in its own way, and people. making people sick. And I really like the things like that, and like the Grey Wardens being specific people that are meant to just fight the evil forces. And I really like things like that. And I have tried to sit down and come up with the world that I need for that story and to make it sound a bit different. And I haven't been able to get it to ever sound right. So I've tried to force the creation. It hasn't really been working. Because I'm also I want to make it like stick to the feel that I remember of Dragon Age Origins, but also sound different. And it's hard to balance that.
What you need to do is find another thing you're playing and take a part of that and shove it in the story. That's what I do.
Once you start stitching together Frankenstein stories, it becomes your own thing. You don't call Mr. Frankenstein, Joe plus Alex plus Jacob plus Colin, right? You say he's Frankenstein. So make your own Frankenstein.
Yeah, I think George R. R. Martin who said that if you pull a little bit from everything, it's not like stealing, it's research.
Pretty much, yeah.
Well, you know what they say, good artists create and great artists steal.
And the highest form of flattery is imitation. So,
sure.
I'm just flattering you. Seriously, stop suing me.
Or, another thing you can do is, because I've tried to do this with different stories, is try to sort of retell a story from a minor character's point of view. Because you'll get an entirely new idea. That's what I tried to do with when I was writing my dystopian story. It's like, okay, because I just finished rereading 1984. I was like, it'd be really interesting to see it from like the people inside Big Brother, see their story. Even though they're evil, they don't believe they're evil, but they are. So it'd be really interesting if I could actually create a story to where the reader comes to their own conclusion that these people are evil, even though you're never told they're evil.
That sounds interesting.
So like I need to go back to it. I kind of dropped it a couple of years ago, but the idea was that that the entire story, you had the rebels or insurgents, whatever you want to call them, they were deemed as bad, but they were actually the good guys. And the entire story is from the point of view of a high-ranking, member of Big Brother. So,
I have dubbed this the Darth Vader story because I vaguely remember saying that. So, writing it from like a Darth Vader type point of view would be really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But not telling them it's Darth Vader until the
end.
You never tell them. You see if they come and so it'd be really interesting social experiment to see who thinks they were the main character was actually the bad guy. Because good and bad is just a matter of perspective, right? The stormtroopers are just doing their job trying to kill Luke. They're not the bad guys in their mind. They're the good guys.
It depends on perspective and like how you want to frame the evildoer, so to say. Like one of the resources I have for story creation is, and this is free on the internet for anyone who wants to go it, is if you Google Dungeons and Dragons Tome of Awesome. It's this like huge like 350-page PDF where it's just like, this is all of the changes to the 3.5 edition we wanted to make, and it's got all of these great like ideas and world-building processes and story-building processes for, dungeon masters, and it's just like, how evil do you want your evil dude to be? Because like he could literally be like, be going around town killing puppies like on screen, making the characters throw up, or he could just like go to the bar after a day's work and share a drink with the players, because at the end of the day, evil people are people too. So it's all about that perspective.
Evil is a hard thing to work with because like how do you have a villain and how do you actually show them to be evil? Is it that you need to show them being unrepentantly evil and kicking puppies? Is it that they're trying to kill everyone again? Or like, what makes them personally evil? I don't know. It's a hard thing, and I'm really bad at making villains. So I just made my villains aliens.
I mean, that's fair. The way I like to do it is give them a motivation. give them a goal, just like the players. And then rather than having it be good versus evil, have it be players versus other players.
Yeah, and that does make them human, which is not what I intended to do with my aliens.
Oh. Human aliens? Oh my god.
I mean, they have a goal, but the human good guys, they don't know it for...
Are they just from
For
like
us,
Mexico or
for a while.
something? Are they just from like Mexico or something?
Ayy. But at the same time, like not knowing the goal of the of whoever your opposition is, that leads to a lot of this like this inner questioning for the characters and just like why are they doing this? Like it helps like the obscuring of the goal for the opposition of the protagonist, right? That makes it really easy for you as a writer to think about how you want your character to process that, right? Because if it's just like literally like I could write a story about like, you know, two soccer teams opposing each other. If I write it from the perspective of one of the soccer players, I could say like, you know, they're like the opposition's goal is to win the game. But if and you know that's pretty cut and dry. But if I like do it as like, you know, two politicians up against each other and you don't know what the goals of the other politician are, suddenly you have to try and figure out what every action they do is getting, what goal their actions are getting them closer to. And it's very easy for a character to get that wrong, and when you get that wrong, it's hilarious.
Because it causes problems. Because,
And problems are what everyone wants to read about.
Exactly.
You don't want to read about this guy who just goes around town, kicks stuff in the face, and then goes home. Like that's not a great adventure. You want to struggle a little bit. You want to invest in the characters. You can't really do that if they're just like, you know, walking around kicking people in the face.
Yeah, so how do you, I mean, speaking of characters, how do you guys come up with, like, or not, I don't want to say quirky, because it's not what I'm going after, but how do you come after, like, unique characters, the ones that at least feel unique to you, the ones that you want to write about, the ones you want to stay in the heads of for point of view and things like that?
So does anyone else want to take this first, or should I go?
I would say, I mean, the setting creates the uniqueness of the character, right? I mean, because like Corlex, he's a bounty hunter in space, and so that changes things. And you can start building backstory to make him unique, but I would say a lot of times it's the character is a product of the story or the world you want to tell. Because you know, if you're writing a futuristic story, he may or may not have nanites in his blood. You know, that's just one of those unique things that you can just play with when you start building the story. So I don't know, maybe it's, I just try to like add like little twists. Like you don't have to create this huge different thing. You just tweak things, and then all of a sudden it's a brand new character that no one's ever seen before.
Yeah, exactly. Like rather than having nanites, you could have midichlorians.
Right. Something. Whatever.
Yeah, just anything, right?
Damn you, George Lucas.
Yeah. Midichlorians are kind of dumb.
I'm sorry. As soon as I heard nanites, I just like, I have to do this.
It's cool.
I'm very guilty of plot-driven characters as well.
So the plot is driving the character instead of the other way
Plot
around?
creates the character.
Yeah.
So half the time I have to stop and be like, this character solely exists for the story to do this, and then I have to take a knife and like cut him out of the story. So the character's going to do this in the story, but who is that character? And that's not fun.
Right, but you can also use the story, well, backstory for the character, because, I mean, I think that's important. At least I like that part of stories when the author's like, you know what, this thing happened to the character, which then informs his decision on the next thing. Because, I mean, like Butcher does it, you don't really get it until really late in the series, but you get these little snippets about how, Dresden had this terrible mentor who tried to turn him evil, and that really changed who he was, and it drove a lot of story elements, at least in the first book, about how he had the doom on top of him, and then later in Proven Guilty, he has to come to grips with the fact that sometimes the Doom is good versus other things. So I think it's a very interesting way to build a character, is use her backstory in your story to inform decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That helps to separate them from just feeling like a plot device, is that you do build up something in the past that tells you why he's playing this role in the story and not just existing in the story.
Yeah, it's an interesting issue when you have villains that are doing something proactively because they have reasons to do so, and then you have the main character protagonist that, especially in like 20, 30 years ago type fantasy, they're going, I don't want to, and then they have to get pushed into doing the story thing. So they're always at the mercy of the villains being proactive, and they're just reacting to the plot. And how do you break out of that? It's kind of hard.
Tough ones.
I mean, at least for the book that I'm writing right now, like, my character is more of the, like, so I kind of do character creation a little differently than you guys, and by a little differently I mean backwards, because I come from playing Dungeons and Dragons, and that's my background in creative storytelling, right? I'm going to create the character and create the world completely separately from each other, right? I'm going to get out my character sheet. I'm going to, give them levels, give them classes, give them abilities, write their backstory, just be like, said character, cool. Then I'm going to, like, split off that part of my brain, make the world, everything around it as the DM, and then when those two finally come together in the collaborative storytelling process, I get to be like, okay, I have this character is interacting in this world. How do I make a story coagulate around that?
Coagulate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely letting the characters create your plot.
Yeah, pretty much.
Just take characters who exist and stick them through your world and let them... Do you plan your stories out ever, or do you just write what they're doing?
So, as a DM, I improv far more than my players want me to, which leads to some great things and leads to some, times where I actually have to, stop the session and just be like, okay, what's next, right? Because sometimes I run out of ideas, right? Everyone runs out of ideas. But, at least, so right now, I've started writing since, March or something like that, and because I haven't had much time to actually sit down and write content for this story, I've been kind of doing a lot of planning, and I won't actually go into the really nitty gritty of what's going on. I'll just be like, okay, when I normally play a Dungeons and Dragons game, or when I normally run a Dungeons and Dragons game, I give the characters I prepare in advance why they're going to do this thing, and kind of what the overall goal is. And then I just let them run free in the world. And I riff with them, and the back and forth leads to all of the interesting events that happens in the middle, the late beginning, and up to the end. And then when it gets to the end, I get to be like, okay, we get to do the fun little encounter, the fun big bad evil guy encounter. And then we do that, and then I have to come up with a whole new story again.
I love D&D.
It's a great time.
I love when your players don't actually follow your story properly.
That's why I improv.
Yeah. And, break your story sometimes.
Yeah.
But that creates its own story.
It can, and then you can take all of these little strays, and then when you're writing the story, actually edit it down, because you can force your characters to do things, but maybe not your players.
Yeah, right? And that's the nice part of it. I have... So my current play group, I have one person who this is his second campaign ever, and his first campaign ever was also with me, a couple months before this group started up, and it was 3 or 4 sessions, and then the group had to dissolve because of, somebody had to take on extra shifts for work. And then I've got another player who's just when I run the game, I railroad everything. And so he's not used to having this kind of freedom in the game that, when I run it, it offers them. And then I've got another dude who's just me crunk, me drink, me smash.
I had a friend who was playing we were playing 40K D&D, and he was playing the apothecary, but he was really, really bad at it and failed all his checks. So it was just like, what happens when you design things around having a doctor do things and the doctor always screws it up?
Yeah.
And
You
your
have
story just
problems.
keeps derailing off of what you were planning on.
And that's
That'd
the
be a lot
nice
of fun.
that's the nice thing about like the collaborative storytelling process, right? Is it's not just like me and the players. The dice are also telling the story. And sometimes I can be like, oh man, this is going to be great. Like they're going to get to this thing and they're going to do the stuff and then they're going to move on and then they fail miserably and I'm like, shit. Now I have to like write this like in the matter of like a minute or two, write this entire workaround for the obstacle that they just failed to get over.
Now I kind of want to just start doing dice rolls for my characters to see if they actually do succeed or not.
Do it.
I mean,
In the most
It's a
mundane
great way. Like,
situations.
and you can use the dice to see how like how hard they win or how hard they lose, right? Because like if you roll a 10, you're just like, okay, you moderately succeed, whatever. If you roll a 20, you're just like, yeah, I break all of the things, and including the other dude's face. And if you roll a 1, you're just like, where'd my sword go?
Yeah, but with the storytelling in the novel form, because you want that tension of struggle, like you were mentioning earlier,
Yeah.
if you do have a character roll a 20 and they're badass and awesome, make sure it makes more problems. Yeah, they succeeded, but now they have other people trying to come after them or something like that. And because they always need more problems. Nothing should ever be easy.
Exactly, and like that's the difficulty with taking something that like is inherently a collaborative storytelling event that is meant to tell the story of everyone involved and porting it so that anyone else can read it and enjoy it. Like there's that huge disconnect between the person who's running the game and the people who are playing the game because they're making the story. It's really easy for them with their conversation, with their interaction to make that story and have everyone enjoy it because they're there. But if for somebody who's not there, they have to overcome like all of these barriers to entry, especially for the normal person who doesn't play D&D, which, I'm not trying to, write books for people who just play D&D. Like that'd be kind of dumb.
I was going to say on the topic of characters who succeed too much, but in Mistborn, Sanderson does that very well with Kelsier, who is just like a natural 20 in everything he does for the whole book until he's not. And all of a sudden you realize that, oh, Kelsier's, spoilers, dead. And the Lord Ruler suddenly becomes that much more scary to you.
But even that, he planned it, so it's like even
True.
the 20 then, like spoilers. But actually, you brought up an interesting point about Mistborn. I was trying to remember something that Sanderson said, like how he created the magic system, or why he created the magic system of Mistborn, in which characters often have the ability to manipulate metal, and they push it to or away from their body. It always has to be from like where they are and their body. They can't like do this from there to there type of sideways motion, which is exactly what he saw done in the Star Wars prequels. I think Darth Maul just did like a motion, and something went from a side to side thing. I was like, but wait, vector physics should still apply to the Force.
I mean, Vader did that all the time too.
Well, I remember Sanderson talking about like Darth Maul did something, and it's like
Not Vader.
yeah, I don't know, but like he was saying like, I know it's just the Force and weird and midichlorians, whatever, but it should still apply to physics. So he decided to make his version of it, which fixes the problem. He gets inspired and he needs to fix something that he saw. And so it's like he has the idea it has to go to and from the person's body in various ways, and it kind of leads to the ability to be able to fly if you can constantly have things to push off of, because also, mass and comparative forces and things like that.
I don't know if I could do the Mistborn flying. Like, that just seems terrifying.
Well, if you can
Go get
control
a degree
yourself.
in physics and you'll be fine.
But I do think that he uses the over-success of his characters to throw you curveballs later in the story.
Yeah. Yeah, he did do that really
That's
well.
definitely a tool that other writers can use as well, because that's like when you have the NPC, like the DM gives the party the NPC, and like you're working along with this NPC, and this NPC is really helpful, and helping the characters, and then all of a sudden you take away that crutch, and you're just like, okay, guys, stand on your own. Good luck.
Right before you get to the final boss.
Yeah, Obi-Wan dies. Woohoo!
Pretty much.
Ooh.
George Lucas did it. Like, if George Lucas did it, it's gotta be a good idea, right? Cough, midichlorians, cough.
Yeah.
Cough, the entire prequels cough.
I liked Darth Maul, alright? Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah, Darth Maul was good.
But he should have stayed dead.
Darth Maul didn't stay dead?
No, they bring him back in the comics or something. He got resurrected somehow or something.
Okay.
Well,
Honestly, the prequels wouldn't have been as bad as long as they just leave out Jar Jar Binks. Like, if they leave out Jar Jar Binks, I'm super happy.
I don't know how accurate it is, but I've always heard the story that he was supposed to
Be the
die.
big bad guy. Oh.
Die earlier in the movie. When they get to the city, he goes over the waterfall because he can't force jump to land.
Oh.
They should have just left that in, but
See, I was just hoping that Disney would just be like Darth Jar Jar, and I'd be like, oh my god, this is amazing.
Yeah, because
I was
I've
all
seen
for that.
conspiracy theories that Jar Jar was actually the big bad guy, and then everybody hated him, so they kind of phased him out.
how could... And Jar Jar wouldn't even been that bad if he just spoke normally. Oh,
Lisa, don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, God. Every
Okay.
original idea Lucas gets.
Yeah. Stop with the Jar Jar. Stop with the Star Wars. Let's move on to something else. How many ideas do you guys have running in your head at once? Do you world build or story build or write 2 different stories at once or 3 or whatever?
8 at least.
Yeah.
I try to stay focused because if I don't, I'll never finish, and finishing is important to me. So I try really hard to keep all my ideas around one central story. I might be writing the second book in my head, but I'm still like in that universe, creating ideas, new plot devices, things like that.
Yeah. Most of the time, I want to stay focused on one story so I can finish it and like put all of my creative power into that one story. But sometimes it doesn't always work. Like a couple years ago, I was trying to write the floating city story, which I had a lot of fun with. But while I was working on it in the kitchen or living room, I had a very small apartment. My husband was playing XCOM right next to me.
Nice.
And I was just kind of look up and watch it a little bit, and I was like, oh, that's kind of fun. And then I don't really remember how, but I had the entire idea for the story I'm currently working on in my head, and I had to write some of it down to be able to get it out. So I started writing, got a piece of paper, and I started writing details of the main character, like what is really important to her, and what is she trying to do, what's the kind of emotional hits I want her to take, and tried to come up with ideas of the world enough that I could let it be, work on it later, and go back to the original story. And sometimes I have to do that. Like in that same summer, I also had a really, really vivid dream, and it would have been a really, really cool story, so I had to write it down as much as I could remember so I can work on it later. I started keeping a notebook, a specific notebook full of just random story ideas that I want to work on later. And sometimes they get paired up. Like I took a medieval Icelandic sagas class. It was tons of fun. And I started getting ideas for a Nordic style story. So I needed to write things down, explain a little bit of what I wanted to do. And then there was more and more ideas coming right after it. So I just kind of put them in the same chunk of the notebook. But every now and then I'll just flip to a random page, write something down, and I keep it in a way that I can go back to it easily, but I don't need to work on it right now, so I can go back to what I was originally doing.
And the wonderful thing about fantasy worlds is there's nothing that says you can't take those ideas and just shove them into the main story you're writing. It's like, oh, we're going to go to a new land now where this is the case,
The
So
city's now Nordic.
yeah.
And that's the other nice thing about fantasy subcultures. You don't necessarily have to have this long, in-depth explanation that makes sense to the reader for why all of these things are. You can just kind of sweep it under the rug of just, this is the world. If you want to explore that and you have that creative idea, you can certainly use that as a plot hook, but it doesn't necessarily have to be there. It just has to, not be you're stepping from, Lord of the Rings into, a Star Wars Star Destroyer, and there has to be at least some continuity for the reader.
Yeah, it does have to be continuity to reader, but also, like, you can just, this is the world, and it's weird, crazy fantasy things. Some people will never buy it. Like, my husband doesn't read fantasy, but I tried telling him about Stormlight Archive a little bit, and I described that the way that planet works is there's these giant winds that come by regularly, and so everything, including the vegetation, had to evolve to be able to protect against the winds. So plants will shrivel up into rock things, like if grass came out of clamshells type things, and then they shrivel up into rock in order to survive the winds. And imagine you can't buy it. It's so stupid to him, he will never be able to enjoy that. So he gets annoyed every time I bring it up, but it's a type of really interesting world.
Yeah, it reminds me, conversation reminds me of a quote from the Comic-Con documentary. If you haven't watched it, it's really good. I think it's on Amazon, maybe Hulu, I don't know. And one of the guys, the comic vendors, talk about how, when you go to a place like this, or if you're reading a book like this, we live in a world and we all have the same ideals, that men can fly, Batman's parents got killed by the Joker. We have this. A lot of people who read these type of books have a shared belief system that they're willing to pull out of reality and be like, oh, well, this is interesting. So you don't always have to be so grounded in a quote unquote true reality. You do need consistency, but it can be crazy.
Yeah, to a certain extent, it will be a different type of audience that you're looking for. Some people don't want to think too hard about it, and other people want things to make sense, and like harder science fiction, harder fantasy, I guess.
And other people will just be like, Nords next to South Americans? That's so cool! Nothing wrong with that.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, especially if you go to the world building subreddit, and people talk about the maps that they're trying to build. It's like, does this look okay? And they'll tell you, it's like, no, your tectonic plates don't make any sense. Your rivers don't make any sense because they're trying to flow uphill, and crazy things. If they're trying to do a more realistic type world, just a new one, they will nitpick really, really hard. And it's a pretty good resource if you have something to show and can get critique from.
Well, it's great that I don't go there, because the world that I have, the series of books that I'm writing right now, the world that takes place on is a literal flat world, right? It is a continent surrounded by water, and nobody has gone far enough out to know what's past there, but it's flat.
It can work. I mean, like Discworld and stuff. It's just if you don't establish that, and you're saying that you're trying to make a realistic geographical map, they will nitpick very hard.
But that's the thing. It's just like, for some definition of realistic, right?
Yeah.
It's still going to be like, if you're writing fantasy, it doesn't have to make sense. It just has to work with the story. If you want it to make sense, that's also great, and can lead to some really interesting opportunities for that story down the road, but it doesn't have to make sense. Like, especially in fantasy, like, you can just, like, chalk everything up to divine power and move on to the story you want to tell, rather than the story that, these nitpicky assholes want you to tell. Yeah,
it's just a difference in audience and a little bit of genre. Like, I would not put Stormlight Archive anywhere near Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So there's reasons for that genre difference and the people who want to read them. So how else do you guys come up with ideas? Do you guys ever use, like, plot generators?
Oh, so here's a point that I kind of wanted to make when you guys were talking about, like, only really having, like, one idea in your head and making sure you finish that. The way I kind of, like, come up with my ideas is just, like, you guys have seen Hercules, right? Like, the Disney animated version?
Yeah.
No.
Oh.
Okay. Well,
What?
at least Alex will know what I'm talking about, right?
How have I seen it, but Jacob hasn't? What?
It's just I missed that one somehow. Like, I haven't seen Hercules and I haven't seen Mulan.
Okay.
I've seen the rest, but I know.
Mulan's worth watching.
When he goes down to the underworld to save his girlfriend or whatever, you see that, like, pool of swirling souls, right?
Mhm.
That's basically my head. And rather than have this nice ducks in a row kind of story, I'm just like, well, something next needs to happen. Reach into pool, swirl hand around, grab something, pull it out. Well, I guess this is happening now.
Yep, that's what I'm going to do with my notebook of ideas. But it kind of reminded me of something that's, I don't know how related. Stephen Bruce, when he writes his stories, he does a very interesting type of structure. He does a lot of the epigraphs at the beginning of each chapter, but in the Vlad Tolstoy series, they always seem to be changing based on different books. Each one of them has a unique theme for the epigraphs, which is great. But he doesn't always know what he's doing in any individual chapter. But he has this point of creativity is that I need to make sure that the character does this exact thing, like looking out a window at some sort of sunny field or something. I need to make sure that the character does that. I don't know how I'm going to do it yet. And that kind of, as a type of structure to keep in mind for the storytelling for yourself, at the very least, it's really fun and interesting, especially the way he does it, because he's an awesome writer. And Colin, you need to read his books.
I have so many books on backlog right now, it's not even funny.
You're not alone there, bud. Don't worry about it. I'm not going to be reading any of these for the next, decade. It's okay.
You need to read Malazan, though, if you haven't.
All right, it'll get added to the backlog, and I'll read it 10 years from now.
It's a massive fantasy story that was built off of his D&D campaigns.
Okay.
Yeah, he did do it from the D&D thing, and then he tried to sell it for 10 years, and it finally took. But I know the story of how he got published, but there's a reason it took him 10 years to get published, right?
The first one in particular had its rough edges. I don't know why he didn't go back and just rework it, but
Me neither.
It's also, I think when you're coming up with stories, it's important to have somebody who's going to be honest with you. Because
beta readers.
You're just like,
beta readers.
Or just you text one of my friends like, hey, does this seem like a good idea for a story? Or now that, we have the writing and high fantasy stuff on Slack, I'll wait, what about this? And then, people come back like, oh, that sounds really cool. Or, it's good. This is when it's good to have good friends. They're like, no, this is really stupid. Don't waste your time. You're like, okay, fine. So you can move on.
Yes.
Moving on from a story idea is just as important as sticking to one.
Yes.
Exactly. And it's really nice to have, those people who are, close and comfortable to you enough that they can say, dude, the hell are you thinking? This is retarded. They will actually be honest with you, just this is terrible. Why would you do that? Versus this is good. Keep doing this. Most if you just put it out to, I mean the internet kind of has that anonymity shield, which is nice. So if you wanted to put your stuff out there for beta readers on the internet, chances are more often than not they're going to be honest because they have that shield of anonymity. But if you're interacting with people that you kind of know in real life, chances are they're just going to stay lukewarm for the entire thing rather than give you actual useful actionable feedback.
Yeah, you can
Which
also
is why I
have
was
the
just
problem with internet people of the fact that they don't want to offend you for whatever reason, so they're just yeah, that was nice, and they don't ever critique it. They don't show you the flaws that you have so you can fix it. I get annoyed with that.
There is a beta readers Reddit, so it might be a good thing for people, a good resource for people.
Mm. Yeah.
I'm mostly trying to guilt my friends, cough cough, to read my stuff and give me feedback.
Yeah. See, I did that and it worked. So.
Yeah, fuck you and
Pretty
your
nice.
30 beta readers.
Yeah.
Can I have them? Can I dip into that?
Not really. All right. So to be fair, of my 30 people who promised me beta reading, they've all I make feedback for them easy, and this is off-topic rant. I make feedback for them easy. Whenever I submit a new chunk of my work to them, I'm just here's a Google form, fill it out. Rather than just give me whatever feedback thoughts you have, right? I give them a couple things on sliders, I give them a couple rate on a scale of 1 to 10s, and then I have really prompted questions to help them give me the feedback that I can use. Rather than just have them spit out a couple pages of whatever, because it's not really fun for the beta readers if you're asking them to read this and then write me 3 pages on what sucks in it and what's good in it, right? You don't want them to feel like beta reading is a work. You want them to feel like beta reading is something that they're going to enjoy, and they're, essentially giving you their thoughts on the creative process and helping you create the story that you're telling to them.
It kind of reminded me of something that Jim Butcher abides by a lot, is that he likes to torture his characters, but he likes to torture his characters so he can torture his audience. So it's like he has the readers that now he's just kind of like, fall in love with this character. I'm going to mangle them horribly. And so you get more motivation to write things because of the audience, at least I find. And
the thing I definitely stole from Jim Butcher was the mini cliffhangers at the end of each chapter. Because I'm sending my chapters out one at a time to my beta readers, and I have gotten so many angry texts from my friends just being like, "You need to write the next chapter now." And I'm just like, I've got life, man. I'm going as fast as I can, I
actually have a funny story about that. When I was writing the Sky City story, I ended at a certain point that was like a huge cliffhanger. Big bad things were happening, and I had to stop because school was getting too hard. And I sent it to my mom, and she read pretty much everything in like 3 days, I think. And then I got an angry text in the middle of class, "You cannot stop there. You have to keep writing right now." And it was hilarious
Did you ever
to me.
continue from that part?
I did write another little bit. And I think I texted her, and I don't know if she ever read it again, but she was like very upset that I had to stop right then, and it was wonderful.
But when that happens, that's when you know you're doing good, right? Because like they're investing themselves in the story. Your readers are putting themselves there. They're making relationships happen between themselves and the characters, and they're putting themselves in that story. And that's ultimately what you want in terms of a good work, is you want to have the readers invest themselves into it. So that way they feel the ups and the downs, and essentially you're taking them for an emotional roller coaster ride.
Yeah, and
deals with pacing and plot too.
Mm.
Yes, but how do you make those emotional roller coasters? What I do is I have a character, I have something important to them, and I put that important thing in jeopardy. And I just figure out ways in the story to make that happen. And I have tons of fun with it.
Oh, it's great, isn't it?
Very horrible person.
Okay. Do we have other ideas for, like, how do you come up with a spark of the story? That is, I'm calling it.
I mean, there's always, like, use something from your life. Like, there's always been this times where it's just like, oh man, I had this crazy story, or like this crazy thing happened to me last week, or whatever. And so if you want to write, like, even if it's like that same premise in like this totally fantastical setting, that still can end up leading to an amazing story, right? Because everyone has those moments where you're just like, something happens and you're just like, I'm going to be telling this story to all of my friends verbally for the next like month. Everyone has those moments.
Yeah,
Turn that into a story. Make that like the initial spark of a story. I'm sure we can all remember at least one of them right now.
I'm just having a lot of fun imagining the Reservations at 8 story in space, because make it interesting by changing the setting,
Yeah.
Good, yeah.
I've got those.
Or tell the same story, but change the setting.
Or steal from your other stories, because
And your
I
friends.
definitely stole a piece from Reservations at 8 to use in Corlex.
Yeah, you can cannibalize your own thought that way.
Mm-hmm.
I've cannibalized my past like D&D one-shots, and there's like all of my past one-shots would make amazing short stories. Which, since I've been running them in this world for the past 4 years, I might just do that. Like, I might just like make a collection of short stories that happens in this world, and just be like, all right, this
Be
all
careful
happened.
that they don't sound like chapters, though, because Colin tried that, and I swear they were chapters, and he was writing a novel. He keeps calling them short stories, but no, those are fucking chapters, dude.
I was going to say I use those Roman short stories to just take random events and turn them into short stories.
They're too connected. They're chapters.
I mean, you like
When one directly influences another, it's a chapter.
Side Jobs is a collection of short stories about non-Dresden people.
And Dresden.
And Dresden.
True. But they're still short stories.
Yes, because they're not directly related to like the happenings in specific books. Those are not causing things in books. They're just little one-off things. You were not doing one-offs. You were writing chapters.
Yeah. And so, last thought on like randomly coming up with ideas for story arcs. Go onto Wikipedia, hit random. That article seems interesting, read it. If not, hit random again until you find something that seems interesting.
Yeah, also history in some ways. Like I started reading, I think the Wikipedia page of Eleanor of Aquitaine. Like, hey, that was fun. Maybe I should do a story about it. And there's like also the medieval Icelandic sagas were great inspiration for that one thing I'm going to do at some point. But I think we're done for this episode, so it's time for Jacob and I guess, to plug all the other shit.
Yes. We are part of the Broken Jars podcasting network. You can find us at brokenjars.xyz. We have the Dresden Files podcast, which Alex is a part of. We have Great Scott, which is a podcast about the show The Office, which I am a part of. We also have 42, the 42 podcast, which I'm a part of, which is, I guess if you want to say like the two originals are Dresden Files and 42, and then we've kind of, obviously we have High Fantasy, which is happening right now. Shylock's Gaming, which is a gaming podcast. We're about to pull in Dangerous to Go Alone, which is a nerd culture podcast. So you're a one-stop shop for all your podcasting needs.
Nerdy podcasting needs specifically.
At Broken Jars Pod on Twitter, at high_fantasy_ on Twitter. Broken Jars Broadcasting on Instagram, especially if you like pictures of guinea pigs. There's plenty of those. So yeah, come see our stuff. It's cool. It's cool. I think. I don't know.
Yeah,
we have fun doing it.
And talk to us because we like interactions with fans because they make us feel all warm and fuzzy inside.
And we would like to thank John for coming on the podcast today to share his stuff.
No problem.
And it's, take what you can, right? It's not, in a lot of respects, writing is all like most things. It's not how you do it, it's how well you do it. So take what you can from us, steal what you can from us, put them into your own ideas.
And write them down.
If you
and then
want.
fill out the story.
We're more than happy to talk to you about your stories. If you want to, talk to us, I don't know why you'd want to talk to us, but you're listening to this podcast, so you value our opinions for some odd
I don't
reason.
think anyone values my opinions until I get published. That's just mine, right there.
We're all trying.
Yeah. All right.
Learn how to use Amazon self-publishing. That really helps a lot. Get out there. The best part about getting your work out there is people are going to tell you it sucks. And, it's okay to, scrape your knees and get a little bloody because you're better for it when you get back up. So that's my advice for the day. Get out there, get broken so you can get back up and be better.
Good shit, Jacob. Good shit.
So, all done? Bye-bye?
Yes.
Bye-bye?
Thanks for coming out to High Fantasy, Colin. Everyone say bye.
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 Bye.